So we're going to get started. We're going to start in alpha order by last name, which means Ms. Janethia Hudley Hayes will go first. She will give us a 3-minute opening statement. And in those 3 minutes, we ask candidates to tell us what are your top 2 or 3 priorities you want to accomplish if you are elected. What role do you see charter schools playing in your vision of public schools in LA? And what qualifies you for this board seat? Ms. Hudley Hayes.
Good evening. Buenos dias. It's call and response. We're in church, it's call and response. Good evening. Good evening. Buenos dias. ¿Cómo está? Gracias. My name is Janethia Hudley Hayes, and I am indeed a candidate. The first thing that I want you to know about me before I even talk to you about my priorities is this. I do not believe that public schools belong to the Los Angeles Unified School District, nor do I believe that they belong to the school board members. Public schools belong to the parents, the students, and the communities that they serve. That's the job of what should happen with public schools. Board members' jobs, and my job, is to, in fact, govern, because that's the trust that you have put in people who are locally elected to govern public schools in California. So our biggest job is to do this, and this is my biggest job, and I think this is the biggest job of board members. My job is to meet constituents, parents, students, teachers, administrators, to find out what their values are, to understand what their beliefs are, to understand what their priorities are, and to make sure that the school district is sensitive and responsive to the needs of parents, to the needs of community members, to the needs of taxpayers, to the needs of the things that you want for your children. So there are 3 goals that I have as a school board member. I believe that there should be effective governance. I believe that every school should be effective for all learners. And I believe that there should be sensible accountability measures that are consistent. I served on the school board from 1999 to 2003. And from 1999 to 2001, I was the president of the school board. During that time, my priorities were to make sure that we got bonds passed so that we could build new schools, so that we should make real the promise of community schooling for young people in the urban part of our city. We built 150 schools, we ended year-round busing, and we got children off the bus. That was a big thing for me. That was something that I thought was important. The other thing that I think is important is that we need to make sure that we are empowering every school site, charter public schools, traditional public schools, magnet schools, innovation design schools. All of those schools, we need to empower parents and those people who are locally delivering education to the students so that they can, in fact, be engaged.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Next, we will have Mr. Alex Johnson give his 3-minute opening statement.
Well, first of all, thank you and good evening. How are you feeling out there? Are you a little hot? I think we need a heat wave in LAUSD. What do I mean by that? It's 93 degrees outside. We've got to fire up LAUSD to make certain that we are putting pressure on those who want to maintain the status quo. We can no longer have mediocrity in our schools. We have to make sure that we are putting the best out there for our young people. My name is Alex Johnson. I am a candidate for LAUSD School Board. I'm a product of District 1, born and raised in this district. I'm happy to have my favorite parents here, my only parents here, my favorite teacher, my mother and father. Mom, Dad, raise your head, say hello to everybody. Give them a round of applause. Charter schools are doing significant work in closing the academic achievement gap. That is probably the single most important issue that faces this district and our community. When you look at graduation rates in District 1, the average graduation rate in District 1 is 56%. The overall LAUSD average is just under 70%. But charter schools are graduating their students at 79%. 79%. Give yourselves a round of applause. And when we look at what the academic achievement gap, who that is impacting, it's impacting Latino and African American students. We see what happens if we don't invest in them on the front end. We see what happens on the back end. So when you look at the graduation rates for African Americans and Latinos, they are much higher than LAUSD's traditional schools. That's a good thing. When you look at the A through G rates, those rates that show what students are prepared for college, they are much higher than the traditional rates. That's a good thing. So charter schools, you have to pat yourself on the back for putting the amount of resources invested in our students, making sure that they are ready and prepared to go to college, that they are prepared with those skills to have a good career. Now, I'm currently a senior advisor on education and public safety for Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas. I've worked on education issues for some time. But my association with charter schools stretches back all the way to when I was in law school. I taught at two schools, Seed Public Charter School, the first of its kind residential boarding school in Southeast Anacostia, DC, and Paul Junior High School. I went to law school back on the East Coast after graduating from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. And that experience was eye-opening. Those students in there, students in one of the lowest income communities in that entire district, were achieving at one of the highest levels across that district. So I believe there are three things, as I have my 10 seconds, maybe 5 seconds left. We've got to focus on making sure that parents are authentically engaged in the process, that we have effective, high-quality teachers, and that we focus on early childhood education and make sure that we have our fair share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and next we will hear from candidate Ms. Rachel Johnson.
Good evening. How's everyone this evening? Well, I want to commend you, first of all, for coming out on an evening like this, as the gentleman said earlier, on a school night. And I also commend you, parents who brought your children to this forum, because, you know, it's important that we engage our children in the process of understanding what impacts them, what impacts their quality of life, and the critical nature of this election in regards to their learning and achievement here in Board District 1. A little about myself. I am a product of LAUSD also. I have 4 children who have graduated from LAUSD, and I have 3 grandchildren who will be starting an early ed program in August. So I am an LAUSD parent. I am invested in this system. I am invested in the schools and in academic achievement. I can also say that I'm a charter school parent. Why? Because I have 2 children. 2 of my daughters teach in a charter system. So they are charter school teachers too. So I have an investment in the learning and achievement of all students, charter as well as LAUSD public school children. Now, what do we need to do as board members? First of all, the bottom line, the focus, is learning and achievement. We keep hearing about closing the achievement gap, closing the achievement gap. Well, this is our mission, and we shouldn't have any other mission other than that. Making sure our children learn and achieve. And what we need to do as board members is make sure that all of our schools, all schools that are teaching our children are fully funded and supported. All schools need to be fully funded and supported. That means they need to have the resources that are necessary for administrators to support teachers and for teachers to support children. That's public schools and public charter schools. All schools. If you're teaching our children, then you need the tools to do so. If our job is to make sure all our kids are learning and achieving. We also need to focus more on community outreach and engagement. Parents, we need to pull parents. Now, you obviously are engaged parents. But as we know that all parents don't have this level of interest, don't have this level of engagement, you know, parents come with a lot of variables. Parents work, some parents work 2 jobs, we don't have a babysitter, we have things that keep us at home and sometimes don't allow us to be involved in schools. But what we have to do is make sure that we do everything that we can to empower our parents, to give our parents the necessary information, give them that high stakes information where they can assist their children so their children can do what they need to do to learn and succeed in life. So we have to make sure that we reach out to all of our parents and provide those opportunities. Go to every school site. Make sure that there's workshops. Make sure that there's support services so that parents can become our partners and continue to be our partners in this process. We also have to make sure that, as a board, that we increase our transparency and our accountability to you and to the
Ms.
children of this
Johnson.
district. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will have Dr. George McKenna give his 3-minute opening statement.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm here because my colleague and friend died while in office, vacating the seat. I have been an educator for my entire career. I have been in charge of and visited more schools than all my other colleagues combined. I have experienced that most people would never have in a lifetime, and I've enjoyed it. I never had a job. It was a joy for me to go to work. I never considered it a job. Now, why am I here? What are my priorities? First of all, I'm here for children. If a school works for children, I'm in favor of that school. I don't care if it's under a tree. I don't care if it's in a cathedral. When I was a principal, that was my cathedral. It was my sanctuary for children. Wherever children are, it should be safe, it should be effective, and if not, accountability should come down on it like hellfire. If, in fact, schools work, I'm for them. If they do not work, I'm not for them. I'm the product of segregated schools in New Orleans, Louisiana, where we had secondhand, hand-me-down textbooks, but I had first-class teachers. I went to public schools, and I went to Catholic schools, and I got SWATs, which didn't work for me, but they gave them to me in the name of Jesus, so I guess I had to take them. But parent empowerment is a part of student emancipation. If students drop out of school, that's a cancer in our society. So one of my priorities is to have a zero tolerance for dropouts, like we have a zero tolerance for drugs and weapons. I'm not talking about zero tolerance for the children, for the concept of a dropout. And a dropout just doesn't pop up in high school. It begins in 3rd and 4th grade. And we need resources to prepare these children for 3 basic skills, not subjects, but skills. They must be able to read with comprehension, write, and solve problems. Those 3 skills will take you through all the other subjects that you could ever possibly imagine. Because in that is your discipline, is your creativity, and is your fundamental skill set that allows you to understand what it is you're reading. Next, I'm looking for the emancipation of students. They should not believe that someplace else is better than school. And you need programs, not slogans. Slogans are not substantive. People have all kinds of slogans. For the children, education is a civil right. My group invented the Educational Civil Rights Committee here in Los Angeles. I'm the chair of it. I hear the White House talking about education as a civil right. I'm not even sure the president knows what that means. I know it's the greatest civil right not yet achieved by us, because all the other things that we achieved in the segregation and the civil rights movement was to say we have equal rights for everybody else, but we never got to equality and adequacy of public education. Teacher preparation is critical. Without great teachers, you can't educate students. You have to put the mask on yourself first before you put the oxygen mask on the child. The teacher comes first. And if we support our teachers, we don't have to fire them. We just improve their struggle, improve their skill set. And the best way to do that, let them observe other teachers who can teach, who teach well. We need resources. I'll say this before I sit down. I'm not in a contest. I'm not trying to defeat anybody. I'm in a commitment.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna.
This is my journey. This is my journey, and I'm your supporter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. Let's give them another round of applause for those opening statements. Now, for the remaining questions, we have asked charter school parents and teachers to ask their questions of the candidates. Again, candidates, in the interest of keeping tight time, please spend no more than 2 minutes on each question. Just keep an eye out for Onika right here in the front. So we will have our parent, Daryl, come and ask the first question.
Good evening. This first question is for Dr. McKenna. Hello, Dr. McKenna. How are you, sir? Dr. McKenna, my name is Daryl Vinson, and I'm a parent at the Ingenium Charter School. John Deasy is the current superintendent of LAUSD, and he has supported the growth of excellent charter schools. And we have heard widely varying reports on your point of view on Superintendent Deasy and his tenure with the district. Very specifically, do you believe the superintendent is doing a good job with the district? And if elected, would you support keeping Deasy's current contract in place through 2016, or would you work to reopen and reconsider, sir?
I have no intention of reopening the superintendent's contract. He was approved, and the board members supervised him. As a superintendent, he supervised me. As a board member, I would be supervising him along with 6 other people. I am not driving Ms. Daisy or Dr. Daisy, okay? I'm not doing any of that. I am supervising the school district in Board District 1. So your question to me is not misplaced, but it is a question that I have no interest in whether the superintendent's contract is renewed or not. I want the most effective superintendent we have in this district. Now, the superintendent has done some wonderful things. They've also done some things that I would disagree with. I don't have to talk about them here because I already expressed it to him. When I disagree, I always tell my supervisor. I think I owe my supervisor a disagreement if I do. I tell him openly. If I agree, I'll implement it. I implemented some things I didn't agree with. Even though I thought they were the wrong thing to do, I did them because he directed me to do it. But I'm here for the children. The superintendent is not the most powerful person in the district. The children are, and you are. I have been a superintendent. There's no power in being a superintendent. There's responsibility. You get more responsibility as you go up the line. If you call that power, you're mistaken. There's only one power, the power that brought you here and the power that will take you out. That's the only power you need to respect. So my responsibility, should I be able to be elected, is to make sure the superintendent is held accountable, like you need to hold me accountable. The board members supervise the superintendent. He supervises everybody else. Okay? There's only one person he supervises. So if Dr. Daisy is effective, I'm for him. If he makes mistakes, I'll hold him accountable for it. If I make mistakes, I expect you to hold me accountable for it. I have no particular agenda going into this. So I'm not in here with I have to gotcha somebody. I'm not trying to gotcha anybody. I am here to make sure that you're represented by whoever is the superintendent. And the superintendent reports to the board members. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. And just to clarify for the audience, each question, although it may be initially directed to one candidate, all of the candidates will answer every question. So I just wanted to clarify that for you. And then also, candidates, if you could, just in the interest of the interpretation that's going on, the simultaneous interpretation, kind of pace yourselves a little bit to make sure that the interpreter captures all of what you're saying. Thank you. So if you need the question repeated, I will call Daryl back up, but we will have next Ms. Rachel Johnson to answer that question, please.
Thank you. You know, Superintendent Daisy works for all of us. We don't work for him, he works for us. And so what we have to do is, as Dr. McKenna has said, hold him accountable for his policy implementation. You know, some of the things that Dr. Daisy has done, you know, I honestly think he has a good vision, but I think his leadership style sometimes leaves a lot to be desired. You can't just shoehorn your vision and just force feed someone a policy and expect for it to be accepted and expect for it to work. What you have to do is when you have an idea, when you have to engage everybody that idea, that policy is going to impact. You have to engage staff members, you have to engage parents, you have to engage teachers, you even have to engage students sometimes. You know, when you're in high school, our high school students are bright enough and are capable enough to have a say-so in what happens in this school district, and their voice needs to be heard also. You know, so thinking about Dr. Daisy, we have to hold him accountable. Now, as the members of the board, in any large organization, whoever it is, a CEO, a superintendent, you have to give him a set of expectations. You have to give him or her a set of goals. And you have to hold them accountable for those goals. Have they met those goals? Have they achieved what you expected them to achieve? If they have, then great, then they can continue with their job. Then you can renew their contract. If not, then they need to go. And Dr. Daisy is no different. You know, so we had to hold him accountable for what we expect for him to accomplish in his role as superintendent. Now, the bottom line is, He wants learning and achievement. So do I, so do we, so do all of you. And so what that looks like, what policy he can put in place to make that happen, what policy
Thank
that
you,
we can
Ms. Johnson.
support, then that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Next, Alex Johnson.
Thank you for the question. I support the superintendent. I believe that the superintendent believes that children must be first. I wholeheartedly believe that. Now, I don't agree with everything the superintendent has done. No one's going to agree with everything that I do if I'm elected to that board. But if children are first, that's a good thing. If the superintendent believes in accountability for schools, that's a good thing. If the superintendent believes in raising graduation rates, which I believe he does, that's a good thing. And graduation rates have risen. That's a good thing. If he believes in reducing the dropout rate, that is a great thing. So I support the superintendent in his policies, working to change the dynamic of LAUSD. The one thing that I agree with the superintendent that I want to highlight is that he does not believe in doing the same thing that we've done for 30-something years. He understands, and we just can't do that. And those who have been in this system for all that time and we're still stuck in the place where we were 30 years ago, he is not tolerant of that. I am not tolerant of that. We should not accept that. You should not accept that. Our kids deserve better. Our children deserve better. So a superintendent who believes in high academic rigor, who believes in high expectations for our young people, a superintendent who believes in accountability, who believes that we must be looking forward to the future, be innovative, creative, and thoughtful in how we impact and change the dynamic of this district. I support that. So I look forward not to going in there and trying to immediately remove the superintendent. I want to work with the superintendent, understanding that he reports to the board, but you can't get anything done if you're always constantly fighting, seeking to remove somebody year in and year out. Nothing gets done. That's ineffective. It's ineffective. It's ineffective. So I support working with the superintendent. I pledge to do that, and I will be a representative who will seek to build consensus and not to divide. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Hudley-Hayes.
The school board has only one very important responsibility, and that is it's the school board that hires the superintendent. Dr. Deasy has a contract. As a newly elected board member, I would not be interested in trying to make sure that that contract wasn't one that we would all uphold. The problem as I see it, and I have a little different take on this having been on the school board, the problem as I see it is this. A school board has to come together, and a school board has to determine, listening to all of the communities, what its priorities are. A school board has to then put goals to those priorities. So that when you do a job announcement and you're looking for a superintendent, you need to make sure who you're looking for, what the skills are you want that person to have, and written into that contract, you have to put those priorities, those goals, those objectives, those benchmarks, what success looks like for you into that contract. That way, you can hold the superintendent accountable with transparency. Because at a board meeting, you announce to the community what the goals were, what the priorities were, what the benchmarks were, how you're going to measure success, and how you're going to evaluate that superintendent. That's the job of the school board before the superintendent even gets hired. Once you put those things in place, you don't have to worry about whether the superintendent has fallen off the mark or has gone down some track that you didn't expect him to go down, because you already know. Everybody knows. You all know, the board knows, everybody knows what those expectations are, what those benchmarks are, what those goals are, what those priorities are, and you keep asking
Thank you,
him
Ms. Hudley-Hayes.
to show that.
Thank you. And now we will have our next question from a charter school teacher.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Imoy Siling. I am a teacher at Green Dot Public Schools, specifically on the Locke campus. Teaching in a Los Angeles charter school is challenging. A common misconception is that we are privatizing schools, splitting up communities, and undermining public schools, when I believe the exact opposite is true. What will you do, and this is directed to Mr. Johnson, what will you do to ensure that charter schools are seen as partners, not adversaries, in educating all kids?
Well, first of all, thank you for your service and thank you for the question. Teachers are fundamental to the learning of our students, and we ought to celebrate them, and I appreciate the work that you do. I think the data speaks for itself. I spoke about that in my opening statement and talked about what charter schools are doing in terms of graduating students, in terms of making sure that they are college ready, college prepared. On every single indicator, charter schools are performing at a higher level than our traditional schools. And one thing we do, which I think is wrong, we can't continue to silo charter schools, pit them against traditional public schools. They're all public schools, and they're all of our students. That is the bottom line. They are all of our students. And if we don't support all of our students, our communities suffer. We send more kids to the public safety system than we do to college. We have to support all of our students. So as a board member, I will be a voice for students. It's not about charter versus traditional, it's about students. It's about showing the public, showing other members of that board that students ought to be first. And if we are doing great things at charter schools that push students over the top, help them graduate, help them to go to college, help them be career ready, we ought to support it. And I will be a champion of that each and every day that I'm on that board. I will celebrate student success. We ought to celebrate student achievement. We ought to celebrate high expectations for our young people. So you have my support that I will be a champion for students once they are learned. Now, I'll also hold charter schools accountable. And we've seen that. The Charter School Association has a mechanism where they hold charter schools accountable. I believe that's important. You've got to have accountability and transparency. You can't be failing students. Your API scores can't be decreasing. You've got to hold schools accountable. But I will support those things that work. I believe in results, and I believe in things that work, and charter schools are working for the majority of our kids who are often caught in this cradle-to-prison pipeline.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. Now, Ms. Rachel Johnson, can you please address the question? Thank you.
Thank you. You know, as a 31-year educator for LAUSD, I must say, you know, you made the statement that teaching at a charter high school is difficult. Teaching anywhere, you know, is difficult, you know, but we do it because we love it. We do it because we care about the students. We wouldn't be in this profession if we didn't, because teachers take a lot of abuse. Teachers take a lot of just non-support when we come to school every day to fight hard for our students and to teach our students, because this is what we do. This is our ministry. This is our mission. As a board member, what we have to do is move past that adversarial position that we have with charter schools. You know, as Mr. Johnson has said, you know, the data is there. The statistics are there. What are charter schools doing that public schools are not? Let's be more collaborative. Let's look at some of those strategies. Let's look at some of those methodologies. Let's share. We have to come to the table and be collaborative. We have to foster that kind of collegiality amongst charter school operators and public school operators, because it's all about educating our children. That's it. The bottom line is learning and achievement. And we want all of our students learning. We want all of our students to move into this society, be productive individuals, and contribute to this world, and contribute to this nation, and have the 21st century skills that they need to be gainfully employed once they leave college. So we have to come to the table and have those kind of collaborative voices, not as adversaries, but as teammates, because we're all working together for learning and achievement. And you need a board member who's going to have that open door policy for charter providers, for public school providers, to come together and have that kind of discussion, to have that kind of open discourse. What can we do together to make sure that our children are learning, sharing ideas, sharing resources,
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
and that collaboration? Thank you.
Thank you. And now Ms. Hudley Hayes. Oh, I'm sorry. George's like, I got the microphone.
Schools are supposed to work. I was a principal of a high school that people were afraid of. The Crips gang was born there. People were fighting to get out of the school. Within a few years, they were fighting to get in. I created a school that people wanted to attend. The dissatisfaction that we have with public schools often means we need an alternative, an option for that. That's what charter schools are, an option, an alternative to schools, the public schools that don't work. Charter schools that work should be supported. Schools that work should be supported. We should have options. We should have options for the right reasons, not because of class differences or racial differences. We should have options because what's good for our children. We should improve schools, particularly the charter schools, before we close them, including public schools. I'm defending a charter school right now in Watts, when I've been working behind the scenes to make sure they don't close it, because they've threatened to close it. And it serves some of the neediest children in our community. It's been successful for many years. And it went from elementary to middle school and had a few challenges. And I was superintendent in there trying to support it. I'm outside now, but I'm still active. I will remain active even if I'm not a board member. So the question is not whether or not I would support a charter school or not support a public school. I would support any school that works. You should stay in business if you work. If you don't, you have a chance to improve. You have more accountabilities as charter schools than we do as public schools. Public schools never close, even if they don't work. We might shift around the laundry and the personnel, but we don't. The school doesn't get taken down. Charter schools can be put out. And that's a hell of a lot of accountability that you're going through. And that's an important thing. You face more accountability than do public schools. So I give you credit for that. But if you're educating children, I'm for you. If you're not, we need to talk. You know, like they said, can we talk? We ought to be able to talk. Because public schools, charter schools, Catholic schools, private schools are supposed to work. Otherwise, it is a misnomer to believe it should even exist. If you can't serve children, why do you call yourself a school?
Thank you. Ms. Hudley Hayes.
The only reason I stand up is so I can see all of you. I'm a small person, so I have to stand up so I can see you. One of the things that's troubling to me is that I don't think that people really quite understand why charter schools were started. And I don't think that people really understand the charter schools law. Charter schools are charter public schools. They are public schools. They are chartered by the board. It was Tom Hayden's legislation, and it was his decision that there would be 100 charter schools in the state of California. 10 of them would operate within LAUSD. The reason that charter schools were started was because they were supposed to be the schools that had 70% of the Ed Code's rules and regulations lifted so that they could innovate, so that they could work with teachers, principals, parents in a different way. They were supposed to be the models for how students could be educated differently and more effectively. People seem to forget that that's how they started. The district does reviews every year. They go to charter schools, they do reviews, and it's a compliance-driven school review. But the district never says to charter schools, what are you doing that's different? How are you, in fact, in educating kids having better performance outcomes? And what is it that we can learn and bring up to scale to schools that are failing the same populations that you have in charter schools? That's the advantage of partnering with charter schools and not seeing them as something other than, as some hostile takeover kind of a thing, but to be able to extract the best of what the best charter schools are doing and figure out whether you can bring that up to scale.
So now we will have our next question from a charter school parent. Ms. Celia?
Good evening. Hello, Mrs. Hadley Hayes. My name is Celia Paniagua Lemus, and I'm a proud parent of an 8th grade scholar at Crown Prep Academy. Now, charter schools have been growing a lot over the past several years, approximately 10% per year, and there are currently 36,000 students on charter waitlists today. There is a clear demand for further charter growth by parents and families. Certainly, my children wouldn't be where they are today without Crown Prep Academy. Do you support a natural pace of charter school growth to meet parents' demand, or do you believe there should be limits? Should the district consider other factors unrelated to student academic needs, such as the district's finances or facilities impact, before approving future charter schools? Thank you.
I don't think there should be any legislation at the federal level, at the state level, at the county level, at the city level. There should be no legislation that limits models of effective schools for parents. There just should not be any legislation that does that. What really needs to happen is, instead of talking about whether or not we want a proliferation of charter schools or whether we want to limit charter schools, is we really need to look at the data. I mean, right now in LAUSD, there are 112,000 students in charter schools. So we need to look at that data, we need to separate that data out, and we need to see whether or not all charter schools are really and truly doing better, meaning are they effectively educating the youngsters that they have, and that's all youngsters. Youngsters with special needs, youngsters who are getting extra money from the state because they've been state identified gifted, youngsters who simply are in charter schools and they are getting the basic $8,200 plus. The real issue for me is not whether or not we should be asking for more charters or limiting charters. The issue is being able to look at the data and trying to make a decision about whether or not charter public schools are really and truly effectively educating the students in those schools. If they're doing a better job, we need to either figure out what they're doing, find out whether or not it can be brought up to scale. If it can't, then we need to make sure that we are looking at charter public schools and any other kind of option. Charter public schools are not the only option. There are innovation design schools in the district, there are magnet schools in the district, there are alternative schools in the district, and there are charter public schools, and there are traditional public schools. We oughtn't be shutting down anything. But we sure ought to be asking questions about everything.
Thank you. George?
I'll try. Thank you. I would agree that limits on effective schools is not very wise, whatever's an effective school. And schools need support. Charter schools have an advantage and a disadvantage. They have an advantage that they get to pick their staff when they open up. Public schools, they pick a school, and if a principal goes to public school, the staff is already there. You can't always select your staff. They also get parents who want to be there. They sign up to go to charter school. You don't have to go to a charter school. You have to attend a public school. So public schools often have students that are reluctant and the parents don't participate. They drop their kids off at kindergarten, pick them up in 12th grade, and pray to Jesus in between. And that's not called parent involvement. So parental involvement is a little bit different in charter schools. And I'm not complaining about that. I am not interested in the competition over the dollars for public and charter schools. I'm interested in the competition for student achievement. Now, some people say, well, the entrepreneurs are coming in using public funds for private enterprise. That's true. That is true. But if they don't hurt children in the process, I'm okay with that. Children need the option to be treated specially. That's why when I was a principal, I changed the name of George Washington High School, which had been there for 50, 70, 60, 70 years, to George Washington Preparatory High School, so that poor kids could call themselves preppies. And if you call yourself a preppy and you act like a preppy, then you're in a prep school. No matter if you're in the middle of the inner city, it doesn't matter. You can be special no matter where you are. So a prep school, call it a charter school, call it a public school, call it whatever. Public schools that don't work are not effective. Charter schools that don't work are not effective and should not be supported. So if you limit success, you shoot yourself in the foot. You don't want to shoot yourself anywhere. You don't want to shoot anybody else. What you want to do is look for models that work and replicate, duplicate, imitate what else works. If it works, imitate it. Don't condemn it. Try to uplift it and emancipate our community through public education.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Mr. Alex Johnson?
Thank you. Question for me is, how do you put a cap on something that works, that is graduating students at a higher rate than our traditional schools? How do you limit that? I don't think you can. If our goal is to make sure that every child has a high-quality public education, you can't limit those things that are working. And you see aspects of charter schools replicated across our traditional schools, whether it's in our partnership schools, such as Partnership for LA's schools, so the mayor's former schools, or whether it's in programs such as LA's Promise. You see the replication of the best practices that are embedded in charter schools across this district. So something is working. People are catching on. And so you can't limit the growth of charter schools. I'm not for that. I believe that if it works for students, if it works for our young people, for primarily our students of color, we've got to support it and make sure that we are holding our feet to the fire in improving our schools. Now, I think there are 2 points that I want to lift up. Number one, we have to improve the sharing of best practices. I went to a school the other day, New Los Angeles Charter School. And I was struck by the project-based learning and the excitement and the level of student engagement in that classroom. It was, from my perspective, evidence of students at work, evidence of students learning, evidence of students getting a high-quality education. So we've got to improve the sharing of best practices to make all of our schools high-quality schools. Number two, when it comes to the space that is available for charter schools, that's one of the biggest factors that impacts charter school growth. You have almost 36,000 people on charter school waiting lists across the district. You've got to find ways that we can start. If charter schools are working, we've got to find ways that we can start at a very early age so that students have an opportunity to go continuously throughout charter schools. So those are 2 points I want to lift up. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Rachel Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you. I am in favor of effective instruction and academic achievement for all children, no matter where they're located, no matter where they go to school. That is the bottom line. Now, in regards to limiting charter schools, we can't put a cap. We can't say, oh, there'll be no more charter schools in Board District 1, or there'll be maybe 5 to 6 charter schools authorized per year. You can't really put a numerical, a quantitative number on that kind of decision making and that kind of policy making. You really cannot. What you have to do is make sure that all schools, public charter, public schools, are held accountable for the learning and achievement of their schools. All schools, if you're educating our neighborhood children, then you should be supported, whether you're a public charter, whether you're a regular public school. You should get the funds, the resources, you should get everything that you need to effectively educate our students, regardless, charter or regular public schools. Now, what we have to do, and I said this before, in Board District 1, we have to foster a collaborative atmosphere between charter schools, public schools, magnet schools, pilot schools. It doesn't matter what public school or what public institution that you're in, you have to come to the table. Share those practices. What is working? What's working in this charter school, whereas the public school in that particular community was failing? Why are the students achieving in this charter school and they weren't achieving in the regular public school? Let's come to the table and share those kinds of practices. Let's share those strategies. Let's open up the dialogue so that every child has the benefit of good practices, of effective pedagogy, of educational theory that we all can share, put on the table to make sure that all students in Board District 1 are learning and achieving. That's in charter schools, public schools, it doesn't matter. We all have to foster that kind of partnership. We're all partners in the learning and achievement of our students. And so that's something that as a board member that I would bring to the table, bringing everybody,
Thank you, Ms.
everybody
Johnson.
in the process.
Thank you, candidates. And candidates, again, just want to remind you to be mindful of the simultaneous interpretation, and we appreciate you. For our next question, we will have Alicia, who is a charter school teacher.
Hello, Ms. Johnson. My name is Elisha, and I'm a teacher at View Park Preparatory Middle School. Facilities access is one of the single biggest factors impacting charter schools in Los Angeles, and the law requires the district to share facilities fairly with LA charters. The district has increasingly used a practice of co-locating charter schools and traditional public schools on LAUSD campuses to solve charter schools' facilities issues. If elected, will you support continued and expanded co-location, even if it means traditional schools must make adjustments and share space with a charter? Secondly, how would you work to ensure these co-locations are successful?
Thank you. I do support the issue of co-location. If you have a public school whose enrollment has decreased and you have empty and unused space, then by law, the charter school can utilize those facilities. You are educating our children. You're educating our children that live in our communities and in our neighborhoods. If you have to pay outrageous amounts for rent in other facilities and you have classroom space on a public school campus, then why not move to that public school campus and utilize that space? And then those monies, those dollars that were normally spent on rent can be spent for resources in the classroom and supporting the learning and achievement of children within that charter school institution. Now, co-location, sometimes it can be very difficult, but if you think about it, you go back in time when the magnet schools first came into existence. Magnet schools and regular school campuses went through the same kind of difficulties. Magnet schools moving into a regular school campus. Co-location was an issue, but as you progress throughout the years, co-location became very seamless. And you can't tell the magnet school student from the regular school campus student. The facilities are shared, the public spaces are shared, the after-school activities are shared. Why can't that be a goal for charter school programs that co-locate on public school grounds? That kind of co-location could also be seamless, but it's going to take some work with public school administrative staff and teachers, as well as charter school administrative staff and teachers. And this is what I will support. It is possible and it can be done if we move past that adversarial, oh, the charter schools are taking us over. No. Charter schools are educating our students. We're all about the business of educating. So co-locating on public school campuses is something that can and should be done and can and should be supported by the board member.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alex Johnson.
Charter schools spend a disproportionate amount on facilities, money that could be better spent in the classroom to serve kids. Charter schools have an argument to make on this issue of co-location, and really the question should be what's best for children. I believe there are a couple of things that should be done. We need greater clarity around the issue of co-location. That's important. We need more transparency and accountability on how co-location actually works. So that when a charter school goes onto a school campus, there are a set of protocols, a set of guidelines that each party can abide by. I think co-location is a good thing. We start from the premise that charter schools are working and educating young people, and that there are best practices that can be shared across the board between traditional public schools and charter public schools that can enhance the quality of all students. So co-location is a good thing. I think the district needs to play a stronger role in abiding by the agreements that it already has in place when it comes to co-location, making certain that those agreements are maintained and that they are abided by in a manner that provides the benefit for charter schools. This is an important issue. If I'm elected to the board, I plan to support greater clarity, greater accountability, greater transparency, and making sure that our agreements that we have in place are abided by for co-location.
Thank you. Ms. Hudley Hayes.
First of all, one of the things that you need to understand is co-location is necessary because in the charter schools law, which I don't think people really pay attention to, it states that if there are vacancies at a traditional public school, that space must be offered to a charter school first. And so co-location is something that should happen because it is cost effective. The other reason that co-location works is if you're going to say that charter public schools are partners with traditional public schools, the fastest way to be able to figure out how to bring something up to scale is if you have a charter school on a campus and you have a traditional public school on a campus. If the charter school, with all due respect, is raising hell and raising grades, then that principal at that traditional public school has someone that they can look to every day to see what they're doing, to see how they're organized, to see why the results are different. Conversely, if the charter school isn't doing well, and they're on a site with a traditional public school that is doing well, the same holds true for them. So co-location is something that not only legally has to happen, but it's a good thing if we're saying that charters are an effective model for educating youngsters. That means that the message gets passed much more quickly if co-location happens. It is also cost effective for the tax dollar for co-location to happen. And so I am a proponent of co-locating charter schools on campuses where there are not enough students for whatever the reasons. The community's old. There are not any children.
Thank you, Ms. Hudley Hayes. Dr. McKenna.
I support that which is reasonable. I support flexibility and not inflexibility and demands that things be done because we can or can't do it that way. Co-location only can exist if there's space on a campus, but you can't put older students on the same floor with younger students that don't fit. So you can't say, I'm going to put middle school students on a kindergarten school room or floor because there's space there. I'm going to take away the teacher's lounge or the workroom or the space or the family room where parents work, because facilities will say, well, that's not a classroom, so it can be taken, and charter schools doing that. I would not support that. So within reasonableness, I would support it. You see, charter schools and public schools can exist if it's done for programmatic, not for political reasons. Because when you put politics in it, you're putting adults in it. The kids don't care. And if public schools and charter schools are not trying to separate the children from each other, because I've seen some charter schools where they got a fence around the charter school and they can't even affiliate or associate with the other kids, and they live in the same neighborhood. Right? And those kids go home together and play ball with each other. They jump on the fence, over the fence on the weekend and play when they're not supposed to. But they do it because I've jumped the fence too. That's how I learned to play basketball. The deal is, if we're flexible with our children and reasonable with adults, we can make this thing work. But I'm not looking for separatism and exclusivity, that we're different than you and you leave us alone and we leave you alone. I believe that the possibilities are fruitful for us to look at it in a way that makes it work for children. If it works for children, I'm for it. If it just satisfies the needs of adults with particular pecuniary interests, I'd question that. Everything is not everything all the time. Everything sometimes has holes in it, and everything has to be examined, and only board members can do that and hold the superintendent accountable for that. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And we will have our next question from a charter school parent.
Hello, Mr. Johnson. My name is Sandra Mitchell, and I'm a proud parent of View Park Preparatory Accelerated Charter Middle School. As depicted in the documentary Finding Superman, the most distinguishing characteristic of LA charter schools leaders is a compelling sense of urgency in the need to solve the problems in our public schools today. Our children should not wait one more day to have access to public schools. Would you support a program of clear academic standards that closed LA's persistently underperforming schools and reopen those campuses to operate with a track record of success?
Well, thank you for your question. Was just at View Park Prep about a month ago speaking to a group of young men on a Saturday Academy program, so thank you for your question. I think that when you have failing schools, when you have schools that are dropout factories that have persisted as such for decades, you can't just say, oh, we'll try something new, slap a Band-Aid on it, and we'll wait next year, a few more years to see what happens. You gotta do something now, right now, in the here and now. Our children can't wait. They deserve much better. So if a school is failing, and you understand the metrics that will distinguish how a school is failing, whether it's across low levels in English language proficiency, low levels in math, what have you. You've got to do something different. And that is what I believe in. I mean, I think the argument, the case that I make is we can't keep doing the same old things that we've been doing. We just can't. Let me say it again. We can't keep doing the same old things that we have been doing. It is ineffective and it is unacceptable, and our children deserve change here and now. So I support bringing in an operator that is performing at a high level if we know that that operator has a good likelihood of improving the quality of that school. I think it's worked in many examples. When you look at Henry Clay and you look at what Green Dot has done over at Henry Clay, one of the lowest performing schools in the district, they've raised those standards. That's what we need in our schools. Effective, high performing schools across the board.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Rachel Johnson.
Thank you. There is not a quick fix. And for me to tell you that there is a quick fix, I would not be truthful. There are institutionalized problems that run throughout LA Unified School District. LA Unified is a very large district, and there's quite a few of underperforming institutions. But as we heard, there's not a clear, consistent, equally and equitably applied standard to low-performing schools. In assisting low-performing schools, in giving them the resources and the support that they need to achieve. And this is something as a board member we have to do, that we have to invest in our neighborhood schools. We have to do that. We can't just say, oh, this school's in program improvement. Oh, but in this community, they've been in program improvement for 10 years. Oh, let's let them continue to be in program improvement. Let them continue to fail because of the community that they're in. But in this community, let's turn this school over, let's reconstitute it, let's restructure it. As a board member, you have to be fair and you have to be equitable in how you go about these very difficult decisions. Now, we have to do our due diligence to do everything that we can as a board member, to assist a low-performing institution. And if we apply the same standard equitably, fairly, consistently across the board with low-performing schools, and they have not turned it around, then yes, let's bring in another operator to see if they can be successful and do the things that we expect these schools to do, and that is to educate our children. You have to be fair and equitable about this.
Of course, schools that fail children need to be reconstituted. The devil in the details is how does that school get reconstituted? And who's in that conversation for reconstitution of that school? If you decide that a school that's been in the school improvement program A school should only be there for 3 years. There's a policy for how long a school can be. The district doesn't always, create that or actually take that policy into consideration. But if you are going to reconstitute a school by the same old rules, let me give you the definition for insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So the question becomes, when you're talking about reconstituting a school, who's in that conversation? It should be parents, community members, teachers, administrators, and every other adult that's in that building, because you have to reconstitute the school with the idea that you want to change the climate and the culture at that school. If you're not talking to everybody, if you haven't diagnosed what the problem is, why is that school failing those youngsters? Is it because the school doesn't understand the youngsters and where they come from? Is it that the people at the school don't understand the culture of the youngsters and the parents and the community where they reside? If you're not going to ask all of those questions, you can reconstitute a school forever, and you're going to get the same results. The school is going to fail the students. Children don't fail schools. Schools fail children.
Thank you, Ms. Headley Hayes. Thank you. Dr. McKenna.
The most important people in a school are the children. The people most responsible for educating those children are called teachers. You cannot have an effective school if you don't have effective teachers. When you restructure a school, and I was responsible for restructuring Fremont. Ray Cortines says restructure it, and I was responsible for overseeing it. And students and parents and alumni sat on committees, no professionals, and selected the teachers, everybody, the teachers, the cook, the cafeteria workers, everybody had to reapply for their job. They didn't like it at all, but they had been there for many, many years doing the same old thing. Now, I hear people talking about change and different, we got to do something different. If you don't do it better, being different just means you mean different, still failing. The question is, what will work? Effective teachers are the key to it. Now, who are the effective teachers who really want to work in a school? Do you know an effective teacher when you see one? Or are you basing your premise on personality or performance? I love my teacher, but I'm failing my classes. I can't pass a standardized test, but I love my teacher. The teacher needs to improve their skill set, and we need master teachers to help them do that. The performance of the school is based upon the teachers, and the most critical person in any school is the principal. You cannot have an effective school with an ineffective principal. Simplistic solutions that say, let's bring in some other people, other providers. If you don't bring in a good principal, the whole thing will fall apart, because that person's work ethic, value system, expectations will determine how that school works, and the whole community will either benefit or it will not benefit. You will be right back where you were before. You can't just have the next one in line trying to be the principal. That's the most important position in public education, is the principal. Single most important position in a charter school, a public school, a Catholic school, anybody else, is the principal.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Thank you, candidates. So candidates, you've done a great job. We have one final question from a parent, but before we get to that, we have a couple of yes/no questions that we would like each of you to answer, a simple yes or no in rapid fire, okay? So candidates, please listen to the question. Your answer will be either yes or no, and I will call your name and you can answer the question. So first question, candidates, do you believe LAUSD's charter school students should have equal access to facilities bonds funds and parcel tax funds as traditional public schools? Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Ms. Headley Hayes.
Yes.
Dr. McKenna.
Maybe.
Candidates, your answer to the questions are yes or no.
That's my answer. You don't think you can tell me how to answer. Maybe, sometimes.
Okay,
Possible.
second question. Candidates, do you believe that the school board should support the growth and expansion of charter school groups that meet high standards of academic and operational performance? Dr. McKenna. Yes or no?
If you want to hear the rest of it, I'll tell you. If not, it's if. I won't expand anything if it doesn't work.
Ms. Hudley Hayes.
Yes.
Ms. Johnson.
If they're working, yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
All right, thank you for that, candidates.
Hello, charter parents. I'm very proud to be here. My name is Maria Salinas, and I'm also a parent of charter school, have 3 sons in 3 different charter schools. So I'm very thankful for every parent that came today. As we bring this forum to a close, please describe what you believe the next 10 or 20 years in public education and in Los Angeles will look like, and what role you see yourself playing in that future, which is all of our kids' futures. How is your vision different from the vision of your competition here this evening? Thank you.
We can start with you, Dr. McKenna.
Well, I don't consider my colleagues here competitors. I consider them aspiring school board members. We all are. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I hope we are more improved than we are. We've been improving, public schools have, and charter schools will be there too. It is the law. But I would like to see a 0 dropout rate. I think that that's the greatest cancer in our community, where children drop out. We measure them, but we don't help them. We have the worst dropout rate in District 1 of any of the districts. And if I'm the school board member in District 1, I'm going to be concerned about District 1. Does it mean I'm unconcerned about the others? Absolutely not. But unapologetically, I'm focused on District 1, which are Black and Latino kids. I supervised most of District 1 when I was a school board, when I was a local district superintendent. I had over 70,000 students in the district. I had only 33 white students in the district, and 25 of them were in one school over at the magnet school next to USC, where the professors brought their children. So it's all black and brown in this neighborhood, and I'm accustomed to that. So I'm always saying, that's what I need to put my barometer on. How are those children doing? When they say the district is doing well, but separate the data to District 1. How is the District 1 doing with regard to the graduation rates and all those other things? If you extract that data, you can see that District 1, if it was a school district by itself, is not doing nearly as well as the whole district as a whole. Is that separatism, elitism, classism? It could be, but I'm saying we need different resources. We need more access to resources that help us compete at a higher level. And if we don't get those resources, we are really hoping for insanity to take over, because we will never change. We're just changing and changing, but nothing's going to improve.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Ms. Hudley Hayes.
I would say to you that I believe within the next 5 to 10 years, public education is not going to look anything like it looks now. So to try to be a clairvoyant and say what it would look like and what we think it ought to look like, I think is not the right way to go, and I don't think that that's what we should be focusing on. We have missed the mark, in my opinion, about the difference between charter public schools and traditional public schools, and this is what it is. There are 187 books that contain the California Education Code. That is the biggest barrier, and that's where we all should be joining together, getting ourselves up to Sacramento, and demanding that the Ed Code itself be rewritten and be redone, and take away all of those barriers, all of those compliance issues that have nothing to do with teaching and learning. They have nothing to do with helping teachers improve their practice. They have nothing to do with allowing you as parents and your teachers and your administrators having the autonomy to develop a school plan that works for you, your students, and your community. Instead of there being competition, those are the things that we now have to focus on over the next 5 to 10 years. How do we get rid of the roadblocks? Well, the biggest roadblock is those 187 books that are in Sacramento. And trust me, I ordered them thinking that when the woman said to me, oh, we can send you all 187, I thought she meant pages. I got books and books and books and books.
Thank you, Ms.
That's
Hudley
what we
Hayes.
need to be thinking about.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
In the next 5 to 10 years, as a member of the Board of Education, this is my vision, and this is what I will strive to achieve in Board District 1. First of all, fully funded schools and fully funded and restored staff. That's in charter public schools, regular public schools, making sure that we receive all of the monies that are necessary to get the resources that students and teachers need to learn and achieve. Next, to restore vocational education. Bring back these programs where children, maybe not every child who desires to go to college, maybe a child wants to learn a trade, graphic design, computer programming, computer literacy. Bring those kind of programs back into our schools and fund those programs. Culinary arts, bringing these innovative and creative programs that will give those children who may not desire to go to a four-year college or four-year institution, give them something else to strive for. Give them something else to be engaged in the school, on the school campus. Let's fully fund early education. Bring the dollars back. Early ed is so critical. That's the foundation for all learning. The cliche is college begins in early ed, college begins in preschool. It does. I'm a former pre-K teacher. I know when I give my children that strong foundation, those are the children that continue to succeed when I give them those early ed skills. Fully fund early education. Bring that back to Board District 1. And I stand with Dr. McKenna on the zero dropout rate. If we can bring the funds and resources back into our school campuses, vocational ed, early ed, STEM programs, STEAM programs that brings in the arts, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, let's bring those programs back into our schools in Board District 1.
Thank you, Ms.
And a
Johnson.
90% graduation rate. I'm really hopeful and idealistic.
Thank you. Mr. Alex Johnson.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the chance to speak with you this evening. I think the conversation has to be about what do we do tomorrow, not what do we do 10 years from now, with all due respect. We've got to talk about the fierce urgency of now and not losing a generation of young people 10 years from now. We've got to act today. And what that means is we need to make certain. But if the question is 10 years from now, we've got to increase our graduation rates. We've got to decrease our dropout rates. We've got to decrease our school push-out rate, making sure that the district that has the highest number of students being pushed out, district number 1, that ends. We can't be sending students to jail or to prison. We've got to have students graduating, making certain that students are college and career ready. That is our promise for the next 10 years. We must ensure, and let me just say this, let me take a step back. On May 17th, this Saturday, we will celebrate the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. This was a case that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, overruled the doctrine of separate but unequal. But when we look to today, we still have unequal schools. We still have students that some have and many have not. That is not what we should be aspiring to. We should be aspiring to a system where every single child has an opportunity to learn. Every single child has a promise of a high-quality public education. That is our charge for the next 10 years. And I will focus on early childhood education, making certain that we have authentic parent engagement, making certain that our schools are community schools, centers of innovation and learning. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again.
Let's give all of the candidates a big round of applause. Thank you for those closing remarks. Thank you for your time. Thank you, audience, for your attention. That was excellent. Thank you, Candace. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.